let's get going. Share that and refresh and let people in. Okay, so the plan here is to do Unit 5 Lesson 4. That is the only goal for today. It is a simple reminders app that we have been sort of dancing around with the previous lessons. All of the features in this have been discussed at some point. And we are not only going to do what is presented here in bubble 1, we're going to add some features. Nothing major. Well, first, let's look at what's supposed to be here. We have an app that will take whatever you add and add it to a list that's clearly happening in the background. And you can then cycle through your items. So there's a text area that's showing. Guys, can you settle down, please? There's a text area that's showing one of the items in the list. There is a text area that's showing which item of the list we are looking at. There is a text input that nicely gets cleared every time. Every time you enter something. The right and left buttons do lock out. They do lock out, meaning they don't go past, they don't do wraparound. We are going to add wraparound. I'm a big fan. It only shows you which item in the list you're looking at. We are going to add the feature that shows which item you're looking at / total number of items. Super easy. And I think it adds a lot of functionality to know where in the list you are while you're looking at it. The other thing we're going to add is, so right now there are, I'm just messing around with it. I have 7 items in the list. If I'm looking at item 3 and I add something, it doesn't change. We are going to make it so that whenever you add something, it jumps to the end of the list to the thing you added as a way of sort of making sure that your thing was there. The other thing we're going to do is add a protection against empty strings, which this one does not have. This one will let the user break it by clicking the add button when there's nothing in it. There's a super easy way to fix that, and we're going to do that. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on to bubble 2 and see what they give us, which is nothing. They give us nothing. They give us all the design elements, and they are all well named. It makes sense. Reminder output, reminder input, add button, left button, right button, count output. Super easy. But we're starting from a blank slate as far as program code goes. So let's do what we always do. Let's sort of figure out what our program code is going to look like. Okay, we're always going to start with variables. And after that, we will have, event handlers. And at the end, we'll have function definitions. They're just functions. And I put a couple other, a comment down at the end so I can use all of the white space. We aren't necessarily going to solve all these in this order, but this will be where things end up. All right. So what are we going to do first? Well, we need something to keep track of anything we're working with. So we're going to start with variables, and you almost always will start with variables. So what does the list do? The list keeps track of things, or the app keeps track of things in a list. We need a list. Okay. What's a good name for a list? How about reminders? just like variables or anything or function definitions, it doesn't really matter what you name them. You can get the program to work naming them, anything, but having some consistent naming conventions helps. I think it's a good idea to name lists the plural of whatever it is, because it will end up being plural reminders. I think reminders is a good name, and we're going to start it as an empty list. We don't have anything in it yet, but we need it to be ready to receive an input. So there's that. And we are going to need a variable that's going to keep track of where we're in the list, just for understanding how, or figuring out to solve the left and right button. The left button is going to make the index go down, and the right button is going to make the index go up. We have two different functions using the same variable. It has to be a global variable. This can't be a local variable because different places are using it. So let's go ahead and make it a global variable. It's the current index. So how about current index? And let's give it an initial value of 0, just because we aren't going to use it until we add something to the list. But as soon as we add something to the list, we'll already be looking at index 0, because that's the only place anything will be in the list. And from there, our other buttons will control it. So 0 is a good place to set it. And I think that's probably it for global variables. Okay, so event handlers, without programming them, just think about what we are going to interact with. Well, we have a left and right button. They are going to need their own event handlers. We have an add button that's going to need an event handler. And this text input doesn't need an event handler. Nothing's going to happen when the user clicks there or types something in. It's not going to be like constantly updated. It's going to wait for the add button. So we need 3 event handlers. A 1, a 2, a 3. And let's do, not necessarily solving them in this order, but we need 1 when the right button is clicked, something's going to happen. When the left button is clicked, something's going to happen. And when the add button is clicked, something's going to happen. So let's see here. Well, the right and left button are useless until we have something to look at. So let's go ahead and solve the add button. Okay, it's hard to debug left and right buttons when we're working with an empty list. So in order to add something to the list, we need the program to get the user's input. That's the first thing. And when we get it, let's make a variable to hold on to it while we're using it. That text input is only going to be used while we're doing add button stuff, appending and whatnot. It's not going to be used anywhere else. And as soon as we use it, we don't need to keep track of it anymore. That is an excellent opportunity for a local variable. So we're going to bring a var in there. And this variable is going to be the new reminder. So how about, let's just call it new reminder. Reminder. And this variable is going to receive, or get, I should say, the text from reminder input, which is an excellent name for it, reminder input. And just to make sure it's working, let's throw a console log in there. Okay, console.log, new reminder. Now, this is just a test, of course, and we add something. There we go. We add something else. There we go. Okay, so it's working. We are getting this variable. Now, we haven't added it to the list. We are just having it work, having it write out, and that's fine. But let's go ahead and add it to the list. I'm going to leave this console log here because we're going to test as we go. But let's append item. Okay, we were going to take this new reminder and add it to the list called reminders. And the thing we're adding is the new reminder. Not in quotes. It is just the new reminder. And now let's run it, but let's console log the entire list every time we add something. Okay, we add something. Okay, it console logs the list, but there's only one item in the list. That's fine. That's the case. Okay, and we add something else, and there's two things in the list. And we add something else. There's three things in the list. But what happens if I do add with nothing in it? It adds something to the list, but it adds that empty string to the list, which means when we cycle through, it's going to be a blank spot. We want to prevent this entire thing from happening. We want to prevent anything from happening if it's an empty string. So we need to wrap we need to go get the text and then check to make sure the text isn't an empty string. So how do we do that? Checking should let you know or make you think about a conditional. What is the condition that we want the list to be added to? What is the condition that we want the program to be allowed to add something to the list? Well, we want new reminders if new reminder does not equal empty string. So long as new reminder, which is the text it's getting, isn't an empty string, then we can let it add it to the list. I think this might be the first time we've used not equals in its natural habitat instead of just like a technical challenge. So long as the text it gets isn't empty, we will let it add to the list. So now we can try again. Okay, we add something, shows the entire list. We add something, shows the entire list. We add a blank, and it's still console logging the entire list, but no blank items are being added to the list, which is the goal. Okay, so that's excellent. I would say that makes it a much more professional app, or at least preventing the user from breaking their own app. It's always a good thing. So while we're here, while we're working with the text input and stuff, I would like to make it so that, and we've done this a bunch of times, so that when we hit the add button, this text area is cleared out. Super easy. Anywhere in here, anywhere after we get that text, we can clear it out. Because as soon as we get it, we don't need the information in there anymore. But just because it's sort of like a finalized thing, I'm going to put it at the end. It just feels like the last thing we should do before, I shouldn't say the last thing, the final thing we should do to this area is set reminder input to an empty string. Reminder input to an empty string. And so now when we run it and we add something to the list, we get that. Okay, so now what's going to happen? Well, nothing's showing up on the list, so it's still, we do have things in the list. Okay, you saw the console log full list. I showed it a second ago. When we add something, it's in the list and it's nicely cleared out and stuff, but we're not showing the list. So how are we going to show the list? Well, we want to set the text of the text output, but all three of our events are going to change and update the text outputs. So that is a great opportunity for a function definition. And why not go with the good old-fashioned update screen? And we're going to put a definition, but we need to be able to call it also, or we need to call it in order for it to work. So update screen. Once we change the list, we want the screen to be updated with the new information. So what does this update screen need to do? Well, it needs to set the text of the text output. Excellent, for sure. Set text of, this is probably called reminder output to whatever's in the list at the current index. So the list is reminders at index current index. Okay, open square bracket, current index, or cur index, close square bracket. Okay, again, you're thinking about, are we interested in the index itself, or are we interested in the thing at the index? So if it's the thing at the index, which is what we're setting the text to, it's the name of the list at index, whatever you're keeping track of. So now this should add a thing. Yeah, there we go. But we can't change the current index yet, so there's nothing to look at. It just added one. There's that. Okay, so another thing that would be useful in further debugging is knowing how many things are in the list. That will help us figure out, or rather, knowing where we are in the list will help us debug the left and right button for sure. And showing where we are on the list is also something we want after the left and right button. So let's, in the update screen, let's throw a set text of count output to current index. Although the problem is that when we add something, we are looking at the first thing in the list. The current index is 0. We want it to show 1 because normal people count from 1. So we're going to set the text to current index plus 1. This is adjusting for starting from 0, but not the way we do. It's not the same type of adjusting to find the last item in the list, because this isn't part of the algorithm. It's not part of a conditional or an index, get. It's just adjusting so the user counts from 1. So now when we add something, we'll go to the current index. We can still add things. We can't change the current index yet. I would say this is the bare minimum matching the example, but we are going to add the feature of not just knowing which index we're looking at, but also which one we're looking at out of how many are there. So how are we going to do that? Well, I strongly recommend going to text mode. And we are going to do a concatenation. We're going to combine a bunch of things with plus signs. So the first thing is current index plus 1. The thing is, our current index plus 1, this is actual arithmetic. This is we want to add 1 to the variable, which is also a number. We are literally doing the addition. The other addition signs are concatenating. The other addition signs are adding trains to the train cars to the end of the train. So we want to make sure that it knows this is math. So I'm going to put current index plus 1 in its own parentheses so that, good old PEMDAS, it does that first and knows to do the math with that. And the result will be what's part of the concatenation. So we want to concat. What is the shape we want for this little output? We want the current index we are in, but 1 more, so we count from 1. Then a slash, so in quotes, a regular slash. Make sure you're connecting every different component with a plus sign, followed by however many items are on the list, which is reminders.length. Okay, it's not .length minus 1. .length minus 1 is the last address. We want to know how many houses are on the street. So we're just putting in .length. And seriously, much easier than figuring out how to build the blocks. So now when we add something, it will say 1 out of 1, 1 out of 2. Okay, we still can't matriculate through the list, but we know we're adding things and we're stuck looking at 1. So we're getting there. This is looking good. I'm happy with it so far. All right, so moving around the list, showing the different items, we're going to use the left and right button. So how is this going to work? Well, the current index is what we're looking at. We want the right button to make that variable go up by 1. And then we call update screen, which will get the string that's at reminders at that newly incremented value or variable. So let's add 1 to index. Okay, right button is going to make current index get current index plus 1. Index. Okay, current index is going to go up by 1. For those of you who can handle it, the sort of professional way of doing it would be current index plus plus. Okay, CURR. Okay, current index plus plus is the same thing as current index gets current index plus 1. It just takes whatever value, whatever variable you have, and increments it by 1. Okay, you can do either way, but I'm going to, why is it not switching back? Yeah, there we go. So I'll leave it the way that we've been doing it in case that was confusing. So we are updating the variable to keep track of where we are, and then we want to call update screen. Okay, this should allow us to add a few things. And we can go through. We can't go back, but it also breaks if we try to go past, because we don't have a way of checking to see that there is nowhere else to go. So let's go ahead and do that here, and we'll solve this one completely and then do the same, the opposite for left. So we are checking something. We are checking to make sure we're not already on the last item, and checking should make you think conditional. So what are the conditions that we want to allow current index to go up? We only want current index to go up if it's not on the last one. So if current index is less than reminders.length minus 1. If the thing we're looking at is anywhere below the last one or to the left of the last one, we can still go up by 1. Anywhere on the list, except for the last one, we can still go up 1. Otherwise, it means we're already on the last one. Don't move. Okay, protect our thing that makes the index move from going past. So now we should be able to add a bunch of things and go through, and it will lock out. Okay, let's do this. Before we do the wraparound, let's solve left button. Left button is going to look a lot like the right button. We want current index to get current index minus 1, which, if you can handle the shorthand, it's current index minus minus goes down by 1. Okay, and what are the conditions that we want to allow that index to go to the left? Well, if whatever we're looking at is greater than the first one, if the one we're looking at is after the first one, we can go back 1. Otherwise, it means we're already on the first one and we can't go any more to the left. And once we do that, we want to move it left unless we can't. And when we're done, we want to update screen. So now we should be able to move around. Okay, and it locks out. let us, it at least doesn't break. Let's add the wraparound functionality. So solving the right one first. Okay, if we're anywhere to the left of the last one, go up by 1. Otherwise, meaning if we are on the last one, set it to the first one. Okay, think if you're on the last one and you go one more, we want to be on the first one, which is 0. Okay, that else condition only happens if we're on the last one. You could invert the conditions and say, if current index is the last one, set it to 0. Otherwise, the point is it has to be one of those two conditions, and we're checking to see if it's on the last one. If it is on the last one, go to the first one. So here, let's add a few. And we go to the right, and it keeps going around. Excellent. Let's do the same, but the opposite for the left button. Okay, if current index is anywhere after the first one, go down by 1. Otherwise, it means we're already on the first one, go to the last one. And the last index is reminders.length -1. And so far, the most common mistake that students have made in this is misspelling length or flipping letters in length, which I've done hundreds of times. Other mistakes are clearing something out before they use it, something like that. But at this point, we should be able to add a few things and go all the way around to the right and go all the way around to the left. And I think we're almost done. We're almost ready to ship it. I would say the only other thing that I would like to add to this is that when I add something to the list, I would like it to jump to that item. Okay, so I'm looking at item 2 out of 4. If I add a 5th item, I want to be looking at that 5th item as I add it to make sure that it's there. And should we add a remove item? Yeah, we're going to add a remove button. I just thought of that. That's going to be great. Okay, so the way we are going to have it jump to the end, well, think about when do we add something? We add something here. We can adjust current index in here just like we do anywhere else, so that when update screen is called, it goes to that. Let's just set current index after at some point after we add an item to the list, we can set current index to the last index. Gets reminders.length -1. So now we add a few things. And no matter which one we're looking at, so if I'm looking at 2 out of 4 and I add a 5th thing, it jumps to the 5th one. I think you'll agree that's at least a slight improvement. Okay, so let's add a remove button. So let's go into design mode. And you can decide, how about right below? In fact, a somewhat useful trick, if you want two things to have the exact same property, size, colors, shape, anything, border size and whatever, you can click on one of them and say duplicate, and it will make it exactly the same size. Of course, we want it to say remove, and let's call it remove button. And so now we have a remove button. Let's go into the code and we have another button. We need a new event. Let's get an event, put it there. I want some more white space. So on event, remove button, click. What do we want to do? Well, let's remove the item. in the list called reminders. Oh, that's not what I want. Remove the item in the list called reminders. Oh my God. Copy. Paste. Okay. Remove the item in the list called reminders. Where in the list? Current index. And we don't need to adjust by 1 because current index is the one that's being shown. And that's the one we want to remove. So it doesn't matter that it's displaying 1 out of 5. We're looking at the first one. The current index is 0. We want to move current index. So it works out. And we're making a change. And of course, then we need to update the screen. And let's see if that works. Okay, everything else, we still move around. We add something, we go to the end, and we hit remove and remove. All right, so the problem is if I'm looking at the last one and I hit remove, it's going to give me an error. The reason for that is that I'm looking at a place that is now empty. So we need to solve that. How can we solve that? Well, as soon as we remove an item, we can always set the current index to the first something, set it to 0, because unless the list is empty, there's always going to be something at index 0. So it doesn't matter if we're deleting the last one, and we can solve the problem of empty list in a second. So we add something, If we're on the last item, hit remove, there's nothing there. So before we call update screen, let's manipulate current index. Let's set it to 0. So that always goes to the first one. Oh, not reminders, current index. Set current index to 0. So it always goes to the first one, which unless it's the last one being deleted, there'll be something there most of the time. And so we add something. Before, when we are on the last one, we hit remove and it would break, but now it just sets it to the first one, no matter how many are there. Okay, and we're on the last one. We hit remove, it goes to the first one. Hit anything else, remove, it just goes to the first one. Excellent. So the problem, and I haven't even solved it yet as we're working, if we remove an empty list, we're going to have a problem. And the problem occurs when we try to set the text with an empty list. You can't set the text of reminders at current index if reminders is an empty list. So what can we do? Well, we want to make sure that we don't set the screen with that empty list. We want to check for something. So let's check to see if there's something in the list. So how do we check if there's something in the list? If reminders dot length is greater than 0. If there's a thing in the list, or rather, don't update screen unless there's something in the list. And we actually need to do that here. Okay, so that will solve the problem of setting the list when it's empty, but there's still going to be an issue, because if we remove the last one, nothing's going to change. Okay, it won't let us remove the last one, but I would like to be able to remove the last one and have it be an empty string. So, or an empty screen. So when can we do that? We can check to see if there's nothing there. So we want a condition where it is empty. Okay, if the list is not empty, set the screen, set the counter, all that stuff. Otherwise, meaning the list is empty, let's set the text to some sort of like add a reminder or something. Okay, not a variable, just the words, add a reminder. Yeah, Nagisti, right here. Yeah, who is this? R? Okay, that's fine. All right, so here we have a situation that is solving the problem of removing everything, but not entirely, because it still says 1 out of 1. And I think I don't think updating, let's just sort of hard code that or fudge it a little bit by setting the text of that. Like pulling this down here, and you might think, and I kind of think that this would work, doing our counter output on an empty list might work. So we add a couple things, remove 2 things. Yeah, okay, current index is still 0, and 1 out of 0 doesn't make sense. So let's just have another version of setting the count output to just whatever we want it to say, not like calculating it at all, just like 0/0. Count output to 0/0. And that is sort of fudging it, because every other time we're like calculating where we're looking, how many there are, putting here, we're just saying like it's empty. So let's see what happens. Remove, good. And if we add something, there we go, we're back. Now, there is another problem, I think. Let's see what happens. Remove this, empty list. Add doesn't break anything because it's not we're not letting it take empty strings. Right and left don't break anything because we're calling update screen, but it's empty and setting the way it is. The problem is, I think if we hit remove on an empty list, we're still trying to cut something. Is that a fatal error? It is not a fatal error. It still works. I was thinking that it wouldn't let us, and we could put a conditional around this, similar to the making sure there's something in there before you remove it. Yeah, let's do that just in case. So the removing of an empty button, or removing when we click remove, when the list is empty. So we add something, we click remove, It's an empty list. We click remove again, and we're telling it to cut something away from an empty list. We don't want this code to run if the list is empty. So we need to check to make sure the list isn't empty. If reminders dot reminders dot length is greater than 0. If there's something in the list, do all the things that we want to do. Otherwise, ignore the button. When you put the entire event handler inside of a condition, you're saying essentially ignore this button completely unless the condition is true, which is what we want. We don't want anything to attempt to be removed from an empty list. That's not going to be good for anybody. Okay, so we hit add, we remove, nothing breaks. And I think that's it. I think we can ship it. Okay. Any questions about this? I know that was a lot. And kind of a little improv as we went. If anybody would like to see a specific portion, I'll show it to you. I'm actually going to end the meeting so that the recording is a reasonable